and welcome to That's Squirrel Speaks. Today is Monday, March 29th. I am Amy Beth, also known as the Fat Squirrel on Ravelry and the Fat SQRRL on Instagram. Thanks for coming over for a visit. Did you notice the backyard has some plants in it? Okay, I am Central Indiana. We are Garden Zone 6B. I am not supposed to put plants in the ground yet. I think our last frost date is supposed to be May 10th. That's generally it's safe to put your plants in the ground mostly. I started bringing the plants up because it was so nice and sunny. And I was like, oh, I need to repot these tomato seedlings. Excuse me. I need to repot these tomato seedlings. And so I did that outside to avoid mess. And then I was like, well, it's so nice. So then they started to be outside and I was bringing them in at night. We had a couple nights where it was a little bit close to frost. Excuse me. I drank my coffee too fast. We had a couple of nights where it was kind of close to being a frost, so I could just bring them in at night. But then they were just outside and then they were starting to look kind of pitiful because some of them were still in their baby seedling bin, growing bin. Bins is not the right word, pots. And I tried this new grow medium this year, which I don't really like. So that was the other reason I brought them up, is because this new grow medium is supposed to be mildew resistant. And I actually found that it was way more prone to mildewiness or green growth than just using soil. So I don't know if I just did something weird. But anyways, the point is they were looking kind of pitiful. And the cucumbers were like, put us in the ground. And I was like, you know what, friends? I hear you. So I worked really hard over the last couple weeks to get my raised beds into shape. Not my abs or my shoulders, but my raised beds are in shape. Most of them. And so yesterday I finally put out the tomatoes and the peppers and the cucumbers. And then I need to wait for a little while for the soil to get warmer for the beans, because green beans are a big thing for me to grow, because it's what we had when I was growing up. So I always have to do those. I always do pole beans because that's always what we had. And then I have potatoes coming. A little bit stressed out that they're not here yet. For no reason. There's plenty of time. Potatoes are one of those things that have a finite life cycle. It's not like tomatoes where they'll just keep producing. Well, depending on the type of tomato. I get the indeterminate tomatoes because I like Amish paste tomatoes because I'm not a big fresh tomato person. I know, sacrilege. My whole family, generations and generations, all of my ancestors rolling in the holes in the ground in which they have been placed. But I've just never really developed a love for the fresh tomato. I don't know why. So I just grow canning tomatoes, which you can also throw into a guacamole or something. But yeah, what was I going with that? I don't remember. But anyway, so garden stuff is happening. I planted out all my dahlias, which was a lot of dahlias. They're so expensive, but they're so beautiful. This is the year. I've only done it once where I killed them. Last year I put them in the ground and they just didn't do very well. The summer before when I stored them, I just did not do a very good job. I didn't know, I thought you could just put them in a brown bag in the basement as long as they didn't get, I didn't know there was a specific moisture. It's like storing fruit. It's ridiculous. Why do I have to love them so much? So we'll see. This year I was talking to my husband and he was talking about it and I was like, well, because there is this rolling of the dice of pulling them up and trying to store them because I will inevitably forget about them and then they'll get too dried out or something. And so there are different methods for overwintering them involving mulching and covering. And so I was like, we'll see at the end of the year what the almanac thinks will happen for this winter. Because I think that I have one that were in raised beds, which is very little protection from the weather, right? Because they're not even insulated by the whole mass of ground. And I think it's a dahlia. I think it's coming up. Watch it be something totally not that. I also have like one volunteer potato. I did not grow potatoes last year, so I looked at it and I was like, that looks like a potato. It's like, it can't be a potato. It's definitely a potato. Because when I took a picture of it and asked Apple, just by swiping up on the thing, it told me that it was a nightshade. And I was like, oh my gosh, I knew it. So anyway, that's the gardening stuff. Oh my gosh, okay. We just like jumped right into it because you were coming over and I was explaining that there's stuff in the yard. And aren't you excited for me? Of course you are. Okay, dahlias, tomatoes, bean trellis up. Love you so much. All of you who were like, get the cowl panels. I just didn't get them this year. We had some left over. Well, before, when I've put up trellising for my tomatoes, I used like galvanized wire, like fencing that you get like in a roll. And when I bought it, oh, this is another thing, inflation. When I bought that fencing, what did I say? I think it was only 5 years ago. 5 or 6 years ago, it was $35 and now it's $68. What? Anyway, so I had that I had been using as my tomato trellising because it's a little bit sturdier. Like before, I had just used the string trellising for my beans, which is also fine. But it just doesn't, I'm not great at keeping it up from year to year because like you have to like pull all the vines off of it. It's a whole thing. It gets tangled up. I'm a mess. So this year I am going to try that fencing for my bean trellising, and then I'm going to try something different for my tomatoes. We'll see how it goes. We'll see. But the bad thing about, well, the only bad thing about that wire fencing that you get in a roll is that the openings are small. I think they're 2x4. They're smaller than they are in the cattle panels. So like I can get my hand through it, which is fine for doing beans. But like when you're using it as like structure for tomatoes, I could get my hands through it, but I couldn't like get I couldn't get a tomato and my hand out. But also like I couldn't reach in far enough to like get the tomatoes that were in the middle of the system. And so I had to like cut like openings. Ugh. So now it's like a death trap. It's like all of these like jagged metal ends. I should probably go get a tetanus booster. I'm trying to remember when I had my tetanus. I could probably go put like some tool dip on the ends of them. I'm not going to. I'm just not. There's no children. It's fine. It's fine. But yeah, so that's all happening. And then I'm really wanting to try to also grow a few Dyer's plants. Like I got an amaranth and some coreopsis and some blue and some Japanese indigo because it's a little bit better suited to this climate. So I'm gonna try to do those too when it gets a little bit warmer. So when I put in beans and stuff, we'll see. Of course, I have too many plants and not enough space because that is the plight of all of the gardeners. Am I right or am I right? You know it. It's true. But so, okay, so that's gardening news. And then also, oh, shameless self-promotion. Oh my gosh. How am I supporting this life of gardening lifestyle? Oh, sure. So in the shop on May 1st at 9 p.m. Eastern, I'll have an update. So the fatsquirrelfibers.com, fatsquirrelfibers.com, May 1st, 9 p.m. Eastern. It's a small update, but I really love it. Oh my gosh, right? So this is a linen cotton canvas, and are these not the most charming owls in the entire universe? Clearly they are. And I'm trying out a new interfacing, and I really like it. So I don't know for sure. It's just on this size, this round. I'm going to experiment with the larger bags because it's definitely less, has a little bit less body than the interfacing I use for my biggest bags. but I really like the texture of it. It doesn't feel, it feels more like just a heavier cloth rather than having that sort of like, it's almost like a foamy, even the very thinnest, even very thin interfacing has sort of like this synthetic-y foamy feeling, which I don't love. But this I really like, and I just think it looks super cute, and it feels great too. It's like a little bit denser weight-wise, so it's a little heavier, but I think it's super charming. Can you tell I have a crush? This is fabric I had been hoarding for quite some time and was just waiting for a good time to make it up. And then I also have so that's the large wedge. That's great for 2 to 3 skein projects or for throwing a couple of projects in on the go. And then I also have this one. What? So this is my more traditional interfacing. It has a lot of body and it's stiffer than the like more cloth-like option there. But, you know, there's pros and cons, right? So one of the pros is that it stands up beautifully on its own, but I love the surface texture of the other one just a bit more. But I mean, how cute are these guys? Are you dying? And then they do have a black canvas bottom because I know a lot of folks don't like these lighter color fabrics for bottoms, especially the bigger bags. So, ta-da, look how cute they are. Now I will say I have a good number of these, but I have 2 or maybe 1, depending on if I keep it or not. But I have at least one of these that will be a reduced price because I don't know what happened. I don't know if it was just in the original run or if it was something that happened when I applied interfacing, but I have a couple of places where the wing sort of ghosts off on another place, which I've never had that happen with heat. It's very strange. It did not happen on all of them by any stretch of imagination. So part of me thinks it might have been a manufacturing issue, but I don't know for sure. Either way, there'll be 1 or 2 bags that'll be pretty heavily discounted because they kind of have like a ghost. And it's sort of like a very light blue of the wing. So just FYI. But isn't that just like the cutest? Oh! I think secretly I might have been hoarding it thinking I would use it for myself. For like a garment or so they're curtains. I don't know. But yeah, so that'll be May 1st, fatsquirrelfibers.com, 9 p.m. Eastern. And then I'll have another update May 15th in all likelihood. Well, probably. And then I might not have any updates in June, depending, just because I'm getting ready for the Super Summer Knit Together in Nashville, Tennessee with the Knit Girls, which is always the best time. If you ever have wanted to try a retreat, it is a great one. I am not sponsored by the Knit Girls. Actually, I guess I kind of am because we're patrons to each other, but I'm not technically sponsored by them. What was I gonna say? Oh, but if you've ever wanted to try a retreat and you're a little bit hesitant or you're not, it is a great time. And I've never had somebody talk to me about it. And I usually do try to inquire, especially for newer folks. And people have always been pleasantly surprised. And it seems like everyone I've talked to has felt like it was a very welcoming space and that they felt like they were integrated into the group. And I'm sure somebody didn't have that experience because like sometimes that happens, but they do really try to do a great retreat for folks and make it as welcoming for folks as they can. So if you're interested, hey, that's an option. Lots of times at the very end, they'll have a space that opens up or, you know, just because people's lives happen. So they usually have a wait list and stuff if you're interested. And they're the Knit Girls with 3 L's, if you don't know. But how would you not know? Don't be silly. Okay. So that's shameless self-promotion. This is why I write things down, I'm telling you. Okay, shameless self-promotion, garden, shenanigans. Shenanigans. Okay, guys. Y'all. Folks. I fell down. Not literally. But I fell down. There's a company in Indianapolis. They're called Flipside Estates. And they do estate sales. And they do them like all the time. And I know lots of different people do estate sales. And I think that they are sort of... well, whatever. I don't know their business. It seems like maybe they're pricier, but it's because they do a lot of advertising and it feels like their stuff is like really approachable. And I'll be honest with you, I'm willing to pay a premium for that because like, I don't want to have to go to 70 different estate sales. Like that is just not my jam. In fact, this is the first estate sale I've ever been to, but I've seen several before that I was like, what should I try? Should I go? And I've always talked myself out of it. Which is not necessarily a bad thing. But this time, y'all, it was like, so they do photographs of, not everything that's for sale, but they do photographs of lots of things. And what they do is they usually have the sale for 2 days. This again, everything is, this is not like the only thing they do, but this is what they do for most of them. For most of the times they have estate sales on a Friday and a Saturday. And then so the Friday is just what it is. And then Saturday is usually like a discount day. So they'll try to get everything out. And so usually they just photograph maybe not everything that's available in this sale, but to give you a good flavor of what's going to be available. And so this one was just, the photographs look like they were in, if there was a magazine called Early American Life, which there may have been, I don't know. But if there had been that magazine, that's what these photographs look like they would have been used for, published in, whatever. Like, really beautiful. Like, not that everything in the house were antiques, because lots of things were newer things that were just made, not to deceive, but just to look old. Like they had some beautiful beds that were just gorgeous, and they were still rope, but they were clearly newer pieces of furniture. And so I went because I was like, oh. And one of the reasons I went is because it was in fact the first picture in the listing. There was this beautiful table, and behind it was like a whole, not a wall of baskets, but like a whole ton of baskets displayed. Some were hanging and some were on tables. And but this basket was on the like dining room table. And this is the basket that I went to get, and it was still there. I signed up. I got there, so the estate sale opened at 9, but they have a waiting list that they put out front an hour before. And I got there at 8:30, and I was like number 50. I thought I was 45, but apparently I was number 55 on the list. And the people in front of me were like serious. Because they only let so many people in at a time because it's somebody's home. Not that anybody's living there, but still it's like a limited amount of space. And so people were just like coming out with just insane amounts of stuff, like beautiful saltware, pottery, which I love. And I was like, oh, I was trying not to look at what people brought out because I didn't want to be like, oh, that's what I wanted. You know what I mean? But I didn't think anybody was bringing out baskets because I guess it makes sense. Like baskets are sort of like a space hog. And I think people just probably, like most of the people there were my age or older, especially the people who got in first were almost all older than me. They probably have gotten their baskets for life and they're like, we're fine. However, I was like, because look at this. Like trying to get a good profile. I've never seen this little like hip, right? So this is, some of us called this an egg basket when I was growing up. Usually they were smaller. And some people call them, what is the other thing? they're called melon baskets if they're round, right? Like if they don't have these, if they're not buttocks baskets, which is what they are advertised as in this show, and what I then found a lot of them listed as when I was looking at, because I was like, where's this basket from? When I saw that it was so beautiful, I didn't realize that it was also very old. But as I was holding the handle, I was just so in love with how it felt. And I was like, oh, this basket is much older than I thought it was. Like, I thought it was going to be just like a modern basket. But it is actually old. But I just loved it so much. And I bought it. And then I went back the next day. So I bought that basket, which I love. And I think is actually a 19th century Pennsylvania basket. Like from what I can tell. I'm not an expert. This is just me like casually Googling. If you're like a professional basketeer, I'm not like coming for your job. But of course, I was just like, I love it so much. Why is it so weird? Why does it have this little like on the side? Because it's also not like most of the baskets that are buttocks baskets or egg baskets, like have very clear spokes. But these spokes, I mean, these are clear spokes, but they are also like, they're wrapped around this. Lots of times the spokes are just like jabbed in, like there'll be like a God's eye or something here in this join. Like at least the egg baskets that my mom made at Bambi Henderson. Oh my gosh, is that her name? Bambi Henderson's craft shop in Amelia, Ohio. Where does that information come from? But I think that's her name. This person that I have not thought of for 30 years. Longer, 35 years, 38 years. She owned, okay, are you a Gen X millennial cusp from the Midwest? She had a craft store that was in an old bank, and all I can remember that there were just like tons of like little wood cutouts that you could like paint. What were we doing with them after they were painted? I don't know. There was probably a toll painting class. I feel like there must have been. Although, I don't know, that feels like a little highbrow. Because it was very much like the ceramic studio where you went in and they had all of the like poured ceramics that you then painted, which we also have one of those in the town I lived in. It was up the street further. But I wish I could remember what the name of her shop was. I should ask my mom. My mom probably remembers. Anyway, so like you get like a million different like wood cutouts. It had like such a specific smell, like in a pleasant way. It was probably because of all of that unfinished wood that had been, it had such a specific smell, which was very nice. And her husband really had like a very Bob Vila look in my memory. I could be wrong. I think that was her husband. I'm just making stuff up at this point. Oh my gosh, I wish I could remember all of the things that were in that place. But anyway, she had basket weaving classes, and one of them was definitely an egg basket. And there was definitely some reed that was dyed peach. And I feel like definitely some seafoam green, because there was a color story of that age of my life. And it was seafoam green and peach. Do y'all remember? Country blue was also a very popular color. Seafoam green and peach was a little bit fancier. Country blue was definitely like a wallpaper border that had ducks on it. Like not naturalistic ducks, like white ducks that had an orange bill and may have had some clothing on, I'm not sure. That's not the part I really remember. We were talking about this basket. So, in that basket making tradition, which I think is sort of like Appalachian from what I understand, like the spokes are like, you have like this kind of God's eye, which you sort of have here, but definitely not to the same kind of like build up, but you stick the spokes into that and then weave. Whereas these, which I guess you still call them spokes, I don't know, but these go around. It's almost like there's not, it's almost like if it were fabric, that the warp and the weft were made of the same thing. And so I'm guessing that these come back, or I don't know. It's kind of fascinating though. No, okay, so the spokes kind of just go along the hoop that is the circumference. But anyway, it's just fascinating to me. And of course, I had to like, oh, so then, okay, so I'll show you. So I got that, which I loved. And there were many other things that I coveted, but which were pretty spendy. This was a spendy activity. This was not a bargain basement. I wish it had been a bargain basement. No, I don't. I don't need more stuff. But I also bought this textile, which is totally a modern, I'm pretty sure this, you know, it's always hard to tell, but I assume that they bought this like at a craft show or something. But I could be wrong. It might just be like a commercial textile. But it's definitely wool and cotton. And isn't it gorgeous? Right? It's so beautiful. And it would be like, what is it? 30 inches square-ish, 28 inches square-ish. Like you could put it on a table, or you could just put it in your antique basket and look at it, because that's what I'm doing. Look how pretty. I don't know if you'll be able to see. The yellow is so gorgeous. Okay, that's the not natural light way. Oh, you can't tell. Trust me, it's gorgeous. And also, it smells like Tuft Woolens because I washed it. Oh, so pretty. So I bought this one, Gus. Oh, the FedEx man is here. Let's see how this goes. Gustafio. He may just like groan and grunt. I'm not sure. And then I went back the next day for half off day. And did I get there at the time that the waiting list went out? Was I number 5 on the list? Yes. Yes, I was. On the way home from the first day, I was like, well, that was really nice. And I had really hemmed and hawed about that basket because it was more than I had wanted to spend. But I thought, you know, as I was justifying the purchase to myself, I was like, well, you know, I'm not going to come back tomorrow. If I came back tomorrow to get this basket, it might not be here. And then I'll have spent that money in the gas. I was like, and what am I going to save? A few dollars? I don't know. Because I didn't know, because it ended up everything was half off. But I didn't know that at the time. They just said it was up to half off. So I was all, that's how I was justifying it. It was totally enjoyable. Like we were waiting in line in the morning and like I was talking to these ladies around me. It was very pleasant. We were talking about all sorts of things. And then I got to look in the house and it was very fun. And it was so funny because this house, one of the rooms, she even had like a faux wall, or like, it's not a faux wall, but like it's not like there was a drywall or plaster wall. It was like a wall that was unlike any wall in the house, but it was like put up to make it look like this like very distressed, very old wooden wall with like a hearth that was not real. She was all in. She was committed. It was very beautiful. But so then I did end up going back. So the next day, this place is like 30 minutes from my house. And so the next morning I was sitting and having my coffee and I had talked myself out of going. I was like, I don't need to go back. I've gotten my basket that I wanted. I don't need to go back. I was having my coffee and I happened to just look at my watch, and it was like the time where if I left within the next 5 minutes, I would be very early and be one of the first people in line. And I was like, what the heck? So I went back. I bought my mom a table. Well, she bought a table. I bought it for, like, I was her proxy buyer. And then I also bought this basket, which is very buttocksy. Sometimes we say buttocks. Look at her. she is much, this girl has got quite a bit of damage. Like, again, which is one of the reasons I was so hesitant to buy it. But the shoulder got me so hard. Also, the handle just was so delicious. But so then I bought this girl, and she is in very good condition. And also maybe two more that are on top of that bookshelf. But like... Oh yeah, so this one definitely, you see this one has the spokes that just like go up to here and stop. They're not like bent and then put into the rim of the basket. I mean, it makes sense that the other one probably would be stronger over the long term. But these spokes are not the same flat. Like these spokes are round, whereas these spokes are flat. It's so unusual. You're like, shut up. So definitely I did not go on like a deep dive into baskets and basket making. And I definitely did not get myself an apple basket making kit. And I definitely did not buy some willow that's coming to me. I definitely also did not do deep research on black ash basketry. Do you know about this? Okay, so these baskets, these buttocks baskets. So when I was looking at stuff, most of the baskets that were like this said that they were likely either hickory or oak, but I have no idea of knowing how. But the thing is, because of that, I looked it up. I was looking at stuff, and then I fell down this hole of black ash basketry, and I feel like I remember reading about that in braiding sweetgrass, but I'm not sure. Sometimes things intertwine, because Indigenous folks traditionally used black ash, which, have you seen how black ash is prepared for baskets? It is magic. You literally, so there's like a log of the tree, and there's like specific kinds of logs you're looking for in terms of like grain and all of that stuff. There's like a whole culture of knowledge around that. And then the way you get the splints, like, so the way you get the really super skinny long pieces of wood is that you bang on the tree, and the tree like separates at its growth rings. I say that like it happens instantaneously. It's not instantaneous, but like through banging on it, you get it to like, it's like the vibrations like shake loose the growth rings, and then you can like split the very ends. Like if this is the end of the log and the log is going this way, you can like split, and then that gives you like the splint or the spline or whatever the word is. Splints, right? Words don't make any sense. And then like it just like pulls up. It's so cool. But then of course there's this like whole dark thing around it where like emerald ash borer is decimating all of the black ash trees. And so there are a lot of people that are making baskets now where they're like, they've had to cut down the trees because they're going to die. And sometimes it's like a fire break almost, where they're trying to kill them, or they're trying to take down trees so that it doesn't spread further or into like stands that are like so far okay. So then you like store the logs underwater. It's fascinating. Fascinating. And you can buy the black ash like through different basket making companies. But I don't know how long that lasts, or like how Indigenous folks feel about that, or I don't know anything about anything. But it is a fascinating art form. Did I say that originally? That the black ash baskets were, yeah, I did say, okay. Because black ash's native range is like the northeast, and by the northeast I don't mean just New England. I mean like if you drew a quadrant through the United States, it's like the upper right quadrant, and then I'm sure up into Canada too, but I don't know. The map I saw was in America. Oh my gosh, there's like a whole history of basketry that I know nothing about. And I have got 17 books in my cart right now that I'm trying not to buy. You know what I should do? I should talk to my buddy who's the librarian at Berea. I bet they have a bunch of books about Appalachian basketry, which is like what I'm really interested in. Why did I think about that? I should use my resources. I haven't bought the books yet, which makes me feel like I'm a saint, basically. But I did buy all these baskets. The baskets, they're a thing. Okay. Oh, so the whole thing is I'm like, oh, I love these baskets so much. They're so gorgeous. And now I want to have some that I can use. And so I really want to learn how to make a basket that is like this one, because it's just so fascinating to me. So that's the reason I got a kit. And then, because it's just reed, it's nothing. It's not like the fancy wood ones. But I'm just curious about, so interesting. I mean, look at the nail. Isn't she lovely? So lovely. Anyway. There's that. Okay. All right, now let's do crafty stuff. Cross stitch. Okay. In cross stitch, I have finished the stitching, the crossed stitching on my Henrietta, which is from Animal Crackers, which is by Stacy Nash Designs. And I think what I'm going to do with her, she's pictured as like a little scissor keep. So she's pictured like that. And I think what I'm going to do though is try to make her like a little stand-up. So I'm going to try to make her just like this, except have like a little round base in here. So theoretically she can stand up. We'll see. I've never tried it before. It doesn't look terribly difficult. We'll see though. But she's so charming. And I used the called for floss, but I didn't use the called for fabric because I had this fabric. She's pretty charming. And she was very fun to stitch. She's a lot of stitching because she's solid. So like the actual number of stitches is quite big for something this size. So it was fairly time consuming, but it didn't feel like it had a ton of counting. It had some, but not a ton. And there wasn't a lot of like blank space counting, which is what I find the most stressful about stitching on linen, is when you have to like, you have your little motif over here and it's all anchored to itself. And then you have to count away from it like 20 stitches. That part is very stressful for me because my eyes go a little bit like, and then I doubt myself quite a bit. But that's her, so she needs finishing. So I've started back working on the Autumn Fructur, which is by Paulette Stewart of Plum Street Samplers. So I've picked mine up again, and this is where I am at. And I'm not using the called for flosses. I am using this little box of Valdani's. So this is 3-strand cotton flossed Folk Art Fusion Collection for Michelle May of the Raspberry Rabbits. And it just seemed like it was a good... I had already had it. I don't know why. I had it, and it seemed like it was a fairly good color port, so I just decided to go with it. And I might supplement it with other things. I don't know, because it feels like this floss is very skinny compared to like a Weeks Dye Works or something. I don't know. I'll check it out. I think I've got enough color that I can just use what's here. Ah. But so there she is. And I don't think this is the fabric that was called for, but it is the same count. So it's 36 count. But I do really like this one, and I wish I knew what it was. But this was like one of the first things I did, and so I was in that place of like, oh, of course I'll remember what it is. So cute. So that I'm working on. I finally put up my toile rooster on my wall, and he looks so charming. So I showed you him not too long ago. That was like my longest ever work in progress, and he's up on the wall, and he looks so good. So it makes me want to do all of the cross stitching. It's true. And then, okay, so that's cross stitching. And then in quilting, last time I showed you my newest table quilt, and I had the top done, and I think I had quilted it, but I hadn't washed it, I had not put on binding. So I just wanted to show you that. I decided to go with this, like, this isn't a shot, like artisan shot cotton. I'm not sure who makes those now that I say it out loud. But they're really nice. They have, I bought this at Crimson Tate, which is one of my local quilt stores. We're lucky in Indianapolis to have several. She's sort of like our modern quilt store. And then we have Backdoor, which is in Greenwood, which is sort of like more traditional quilting. And then there's other ones too, but those are the ones that are closest to me, and like they kind of have everything I want. But yeah, so I'm very pleased with how it turned out. Maybe I hadn't done the quilting yet, because I did this weird thing where I did like the 3-stitch zigzag over these seams because I had ironed these open. So the seam between these guys I had ironed open. So I did the zigzag stitch on those, the triple stitch zigzag or something like that. But then everywhere else I just did a grid, and I just did it super loosey-goosey. Oh yeah, we talked about this because I remember being like, I'm not perfect, and I don't really care to be. So it's just like 1.5 grid. And the back is just like Kona cotton or something, because it'll be on my table and I don't feel the need to flip it over. But yeah, I'm very pleased with how it turned out. Isn't it cute? It's so, I would never have picked these fabrics, but I really love it. And it feels very summery and playful, which I really like. So I can't remember now who I bought that. I think I bought the kit, the Fat Quarter Bundle from Lo and Behold, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was from Lo and Behold Stitchery. She does like a limited edition, limited release of Fat Quarter Bundle, but it's just all different designers. There's some Ruby Star in there. There's all sorts of different things, but love it. So yeah, I've said this before. Thank you for being patient as I repeat it, but there are new kids. If you're interested in getting started quilting and you're intimidated, fabric designers make huge collections nowadays. Like Lori Holt, like lots of times her collections have like 34 to 40 fabrics in them. They're bananas. And that is to say, they have enough like fat quarters that you can make a whole quilt, and like the fabrics are designed to go together. But also, there's sometimes a point where you're like, I kind of want to go a little bit beyond that. But especially if you don't have a quilt store or near you, or the quilt stores are whatever. People that do curated fat quarter bundles, they're just putting together all different fat quarters from different designers, but that look really beautiful together. And sometimes they're more surprising and things I would not have thought to put together. And they're already done. Because it's difficult when you're in a fabric store. If you've not, which I'm not in the place yet, like my mom has been quilting long enough that she can just look at the fabric and know like these are going to be great together. Whereas I still would need to like pull everything and like put it next to each other and then be like this or this. And when you're dealing with like bolts of fabric, I feel like a really obnoxious customer trying to do that. And I know that fabric stores probably wouldn't care if you were in there where it wasn't busy or what have you, but I just am not in that place. I'm not comfortable enough doing that to like pull 30 bolts of fabric off a wall to see how they go together. So curated fat quarter bundles are great, and you can find them on Etsy, you know, and lots of, and then there are other different, like Cottonier I know does them, Squiggly, is it Squiggly Yarn Company in Australia does them. They're the first people that I saw that had them, and I was like, oh, what is this? Squibbly gum in Australia. But anyway, so you can also just, you know, Google fat quarter bundles or look on Etsy, and you can find lots of different ones. So many flavors. So that's that. And then I'm also working more on my little like kooky wacky carpet bag. So this is all scraps except for these beautiful patches by Addie Best Studio. Right. And then I'm just, look at how cute my hand quilting is on there. Just doing big stitch quilting with number 8 pearl cotton. Yeah. And like, how fun is this color? It's like this acidy, yellowy, greeny. It's like kind of sulfury. I guess sulfur is the best word for it. In the spool, it looks green, but on here it looks yellow. And I think, yeah, I think we had done this one before, and I had continued the pattern, like the stitching pattern. I had continued onto the patch, but I decided after I had looked at it and sat with it a bit that I did not want to do that. So I actually just removed the stitches from this patch and just outlined it. So you can see the little stitching around there, because I really wanted the patches to remain their own beautiful selves. So there's that. And then through the bottom, which will be like the bottom of the bag, I just did some like basic line quilting. I did lines around here. And then I'm doing a slightly different pattern. It's actually pretty much the same pattern, just a smaller scale, that I'm going to do on this side. So I have it all traced, and now I'm just working on doing the stitching. It is really fun. I really do like this. There's certain places I don't like. I love to do it around the edges where you can like easily hold your fabric. I don't like to do it in the middle where you have to do like this thing, and like don't love that part as much. So I don't know that I'll ever do it like on an actual quilt. And I know you can put them in frames and you can do all sorts of stuff. But I really like the convenience of doing it without a frame or a hoop, because you can turn it however you want to. It's just a little easier to manipulate. And maybe I'll get better at the like this part. So there's that. Okay, that's all my quilting. Then, oh, I did want to say this though, going back to baskets. Okay, so like, what's up with y'all in the England? Y'all have like a much more robust willow like community than we have. Like, people still do willow baskets in America, but it's really hard to find. I don't know, maybe there are more people doing them and they're just not like as much of a network. Or maybe willow just really loves England, and because like you've historically coppiced everything that's just like there already, and so there are more willows. I don't know. But if you know, I would love to know. Again, I know that we have like folks doing willow, and I know we have folks selling the material stuff, but it seems like when I'm looking for classes, like 80% of them, I like go to the location and it's like, it's not here, it's there, it's across the pond. What's up with that? I want more willow classes. Did I have like a deep fantasy over the last few weeks that I was going to find out that I'm a willow weaving like savant, and that I am going to be a person who teaches willow weaving classes? Of course I did. Of course I did. I might be. You never know. We're going to find out together. If you never hear of it again, I was not a savant. But I do love all the classes are like, you must have strong hands. I'm like, that is actually the thing I can do. Okay. Then let's go on to knitting. Okay, in progress. I have so much in progress, y'all. Okay, so I'll show this to you first. I've been working on my Knit Spin Farm Bat Vent from 2023 shawl. Look at her. And I have started to do a little feather and fan on the border, which is a good thing because just all that garter was making my eyeballs die. Not my eyeballs, my will to knit. I love doing garter, but sometimes you're like, okay. So I am doing a little feather and fan border, which is just a stitch you can find anywhere. If you're curious about how to do it with increases, I'm sure there are places that tell you how to do it. Rather than think about it, I just used Gudrun Johnson's Hap shawl. I had that pattern, have made it before, so I just used that for the feather and fan. And the shape I'm using is like a 3. So we have 4 points of increase. 1, 2, well, we actually have like 2, 4, 6 points of increase, but we have 3 wedges rather than like a triangle shawl, which has 2 wedges. Because these are fun because they just sit on your shoulders very nicely. Which I think is the Susan B. Anderson Yowza Weigh It shawl number 2, if I'm not mistaken, is that shape. Or if you've ever had the chance to take a class with Susan, she shows you how to do lots of different shawl shapes and how to do their increases. So yeah, and then I may or may not do an applied border. I haven't quite decided whether I'm just going to bind off after feather and fan, or if I'm going to do applied. I love doing applied borders, but there is always this like, how much yarn is it going to take kind of thing. And I think, as long as I use whatever, I feel fairly confident that I'll have enough yarn if I do what I think I'm going to do, but we'll see. So there is that. And then it's been a while probably since I've talked about it. What I did is I spun all of the singles for Bat Vent. So Bat Vent, you get a little mini bat every day for 24 days. I used mine for December, and I spindle spun all of them. And then what I decided to do is ply it with a mohair, which was kind of crazy because it gave me a lot of yarn. But yeah, speaking of mohair silk, and I don't know if I used Knit Picks Aloft and Webb's Northampton Wools. No, not Northampton Wools. That's another yarn store. Webb's Valley Yarns, right? Southampton is their mohair silk, and I use those. Those to me feel like almost the same yarn. Well, they feel the same yarn to me, so I just use them interchangeably. So it's one of those two. I don't know. The next thing I have to show you is my Bon Bec, BonBec hood, which is by Emily Louise. Sorry. And here is a picture. It is written for a strand of fingering held along with a strand of mohair silk. I used a strand of Sport Rate. So this is Malabrigo Arroyo, right? And then just which is the pink, and then a strand of mohair silk in white. And I also am contrary, so I decided to steek it because all of this in stockinette just was a little bit much for my head. So I'm gonna steek it. So I'm done with my knitting, right? You have this like cute little back to the hood, and here's my steeks at the top. And all I did was cast on. I did cast on quite a few stitches for the steek. Usually I use 6 stitches almost universally. I think you're supposed to actually use like a measurement, like an inch. But I went ahead and made mine beefier because the hood is made with like a channel for a drawstring. And so I thought, well, if I make the steek wide enough, I can just use that rather than I think the pattern has you go pick it up, and then do some seaming. So I don't know, we'll see if it works. So yeah, but the actual knitting part is done. And so I need to cut this, and then I think I'm gonna use, I meant to put it, I had it in my pocket earlier, and then we went for a bike ride and I took it out. But I have some like fold over elastic. Like, do you remember when headbands were really popular with that fold over elastic for a while? Or like use it for underwear legs or whatever. I think I have some in this like really bright aqua-y teal-y color. Aqua-y color. And I think that might be fun to just steek it and then use that for the edge. To sew it down. We'll see. Might just be like a little fun like pop of color inside of it, yet would still be stretchy to go along with the knitting itself. You wouldn't need to use it. I just thought it might make it look a little bit more finished inside, because this is for another human being. If it was for me, I'd probably think whatever, it's fine. Now mine is sport weight, so and my gauge is bigger than, I have fewer stitches to the inch than the designer did, but I still had to cast on more stitches than the largest size, because it was very small. I know she's a small human, but like it seemed really small. So maybe I read something wrong or whatever, but just, be aware. I'm just mentioning it. Because even with the additional stitches, it's like, okay, I have a hairy thing. I have a hair thing in. Even with the additional stitches, I still feel a little bit snug. I can't see you. I hope you're still there and you just haven't run off and made me talk to myself in my hood like the saddest lonely person ever. But yeah. And of course, like it's going to open up and be back here. So like, but I mean, I'm talking about the neck. It feels like the neck is kind of like, whew. Oh my gosh, you're still there. Thanks. Thank you for being a friend. So there's that. Can I leave this down? My hair's looking a little shaggy. I haven't gotten a haircut lately. Also, I just went for a bike ride. Okay, so there's that. I have mohair in my mouth. Nice. I am also working more on my mochi sweater that we talked about last time. And in fact, I've made great progress. So I am loosely basing mine. It was inspired by the Estava sweater by Jonna Ietala. I'm sorry, folks. Don't even know my letters. JONNA HIETALA. The pattern is right there. So this one is knit top down. It's knit raglan. And it is knit, I believe, in worsted weight yarn, if I'm not mistaken. So the gauge is 20 and a half stitches to 4 inches. Oh, it's DK. I'm a wild woman. Okay, so mine is just loosely basically, it's the stitch pattern. And it ended up being raglan. But I wasn't entirely sure when I started. So I have knit mine from the bottom up because I wanted to be able to have time to decide how I wanted to do the shoulders. And mine is knit with Mochi by Barocco. This is color 3257. It's 1.75 ounces or 50 grams to 191 yards. And I am holding a double. Because I'm crazy. I think what it is I've recently really loved the silhouette of this sort of like, I'm going to call it a bomber jacket silhouette, where it's just like a little bit rounder. There's like more ease, but the ease has more bod, like there's more body to it. It doesn't like drape fully, right? So like you can have ease where it's like a silky fabric and it just drapes and falls, or you can have like a lot of ease like in a wool jacket where it kind of is more boxy. So I'm liking that. Oh my gosh, why did I put that mohair hood on? I have a death wish, clearly. So it has like a slightly boxier, a rounder profile. So I think that's the reason I was like really drawn to the idea of doubling it up and making it hopefully have that profile. But my sleeves are done. I even seamed them. So I worked my sleeves flat and then joined them at the armpit and knit up, which meant I had open sleeves. So I just seamed the bottoms. And they look great. They actually do look really good. But it probably would look better if I showed you the actual seam instead of just pretending. But they do look really good. Just use mattress stitch. And I just did like a collar, like a 1x1 rib. I did do some short rows to make the collar a little deeper in the back. So rather than trying to do the short rows in this pattern, which is like a 4-row repeat, I was like, I'll just do it in the collar. So you'll see my collar is pretty deep in the back. Well, it's fairly deep compared to the front, which is just like a few stitches deep. And then I am applying my button band. So I paused because I was waiting on buttons to come so that I can figure out my spacing and how wide I need to make my button band and all that stuff. But so far I'm really pleased with it. I like how it looks as I've tried it on. So we'll see how it does with blocking and everything else. It is a pretty heavy sweater. It's going to end up being 12. So it's going to end up being 600 grams. But that's really lightweight for a sweater my size in a thick yarn. And again, a yarn held double is a pretty thick yarn. So I'm hoping it'll work out nicely. We'll see. I'm gonna need to move north to wear it though. Does anybody north want me to come visit them? Like, so I can wear my sweater? It's a cardigan. I can wear it open. It'll be fun. It'll be like my jacket. It'll be like my bomber jacket. I'll be so cool. That was the most uncool thing anybody's ever done. And just in case you're curious, that's my Aran sweater bag. And there's 14 skeins of yarn in it right now. I have 14 skeins of this yarn, so most of it is in the sweater, and it's poofy yarn. So there's that. And then the last thing I'm going to show you is my Balshin by Caitlin Hunter. And this is a sweater that I had made with this beautiful mohair in the Disco Clam colorway by Republica Unicornia. And Harrisville Yarns, I believe it's Watershed, the sport weight one. And it's sort of this like weird shape, and I liked the way it looked, but I didn't like the way it felt on my body. I had made the sleeves too tight. They need to have a little bit of structure because there is no like shoulder seam. So sort of like where it attaches to your body is at the elbow. Right? So you see it's pretty, but, and I did them as suggested, but they were just too tight. And I told myself that it was fine. I told myself that it was fine. But when I went to actually like put it on, it looked cute, but it did not feel good. So I kind of went back and forth of whether I should just gift it. But I did decide I was going to give it another try. So I don't have anything to show you except that I ripped it out. Ta-da! So I have gone back to, like, my sleeves would have joined right there. So yeah, like, why did I think that was enough fabric? I guess I was thinking about my wrist, but it doesn't hit your wrist. I think that was part of it too, is I wasn't sure where it would kind of like fall on my body, but I definitely need the arm size to be like, or whatever, the wrist size, whatever. I need the arm opening to be like twice this big for it to be comfortable. And then hopefully that will also let the fabric drape down on my shoulders more, because not only was it like tight here, which didn't feel great, but I think because it was tight on my arm, it kind of like, it pushed the fabric so that all the fabric was between my elbow and my shoulder. Whereas if it's looser there, it can fall down comfortably. And hopefully drape down so that this part opens up out more rather than feeling like it's like kind of stacked up. That's my hope. Because I love this color combination so much. And I love how the yoke looks. It looks so gorgeous. So I hope that that will remedy the situation. It was just one of those things where when you finish it, you're just like, time out. Okay, so that's all the crafting. That's all the crafting. Thank you so much for visiting. I'm going to talk about some books now, so if you're not interested, we will see you later. If you are interested, oh my gosh, let's talk. Bow. Okay, so in the last few weeks, I've been reading, for comfort reading, I read James Herriot's All Things Bright and Beautiful, and then also a couple of Agatha Raisins, because sometimes you just need brain candy when you're sewing or whatever. Sometimes you just need brain candy. Full stop. I also listened to American Sherlock and the Ghost Club by Kate Winkler Dawson, who has a podcast. I recommend her podcast over those books. And I'll leave it there. But so those are the things. I mean, I just want to kind of give you an idea of like some other things I'm reading at the time. But the ones I'm going to talk about are Eager, The Surprising Secret Life of Beavers and Why They Matter by Ben Goldfarb. So let me read you the blurb. Winner of the 2019 PEN/EO Wilson Award for Literary Science Writing, in Eager, environmental journalist Ben Goldfarb reveals that our modern idea of what a healthy landscape looks like and how it functions is wrong, distorted by the fur trade that once trapped out millions of beavers from North America's lakes and rivers. The consequences of losing beavers were profound. Streams eroded, wetlands dried up, and species from salmon to swans lost vital habitat. Today, a growing coalition of beaver believers, including scientists, ranchers, and passionate citizens, recognizes that ecosystems with beavers are far healthier for humans and non-humans alike than those without them. From the Nevada deserts to the Scottish Highlands, believers are now hard at work restoring these industrious rodents to their former haunts. Eager is a powerful story about one of the world's most influential species, how North America was colonized, how our landscapes have changed over centuries, and how beavers can help us fight drought, flooding, wildfire, extinction, and the ravages of climate change. Ultimately, it's about how we can learn to coexist harmoniously and even beneficially with our fellow travelers on this planet. I enjoyed this quite a bit. I saw this at the bookstore when it first came out and immediately added it to my queue, but just had never quite gotten around to it. I did like the audio version. I think this book is a little bit repetitive. I understand, and that feels dismissive saying that. As a person who is not super passionate about wetland conservation and ecosystems, I am not that I'm not, that sounds like I don't care, but I'm not a scientist. And so you telling me about case A and case B that are slightly different are I'm feeling like they are still the same case. Although I understand if I were a scientist or somebody who was like deeply in this realm, I would understand completely why you're telling me about case A and case B. Does that make sense? So for me, the audio version was a good option. I think if I had read the paper version, I would have gotten really bogged down and just been like, bogged down. And been just like, ugh, I don't know. So the audio version was a good option for me. Also, it didn't feel like it was a book that I felt like I needed to take a million notes on. So I was okay with not having like a thing to annotate. But I did really enjoy it all the same. Yeah, beavers are cool. They're super cool. They're kind of the best. That's basically the book. They're great. One of the things that I would have liked, and it is interesting because again, I had this realization a couple of years ago where I didn't realize the beaver hat trade. If you've been with me for a long time, I thought beaver hats were like coonskin hats. Like whenever I read about them in my history books, like when I was in high school and junior high school, like I thought it was going to be like a fur hat, like fluffy fur. And I was just like, okay, sure. But beaver hats were super popular because beavers, they have a double coat, like they have an outer coat and then they have like a super, very, very dense inner coat that has lots and lots of barbs on it. We know from our wool means that it felts really, really well. So it makes an amazingly weather resistant and very long wearing wool, like bowler kind of hat, or Stetson-y kind of hat, or top hat, because this is like, well, when I looked it up to see when the date range was, it was like the 16th century to like 1850 or something. So this is a big range, but they were like, in the US, the big push of the beaver trade was the late 1700s into the 1830s. So beavers, really great at wetland management. They're much, much better at it than the US, than the government. That is the book. They are way better at it than the government. Because, you know, white people came in to North America, completely disregarded indigenous knowledge because it didn't look like we thought it should. So, and there was a dollar value attached to beavers. So we went in and just eradicated all of them. Just every single one we could find without any regard to systems that they were maintaining. And so most of the United States doesn't really know what their areas would have looked like. Like, right? Like, we don't know what these wetlands would have looked like because the beavers were everywhere. Like, the population density that they anticipate through study is insane. Like, they were everywhere. And so all of those beavers were eradicated, again, prior to something like 1830s, most of them prior to like 1830. And so there were not a lot of surveys that we have record of what the lands look like before that. And that was one of the things that I was kind of curious about in the book, that one of the only things I could find is like sort of like is that the author does talk a bit about contemporary indigenous peoples and beaver and wetland management and river management specifically. But there's really not a discussion of like traditional knowledge around the beaver, traditional indigenous knowledge, historical indigenous knowledge around the beaver. And when I was reading, I was like, well, is that just like, were they taken out so long ago that that knowledge just isn't part of the living culture, like of the living history of the culture? Or, but then I was looking at it and I was like, well, no, because the buffalo, there's still a lot of culture around the buffalo, but that's not that much later than the beaver. Like it's almost, there's like an overlapping period. Like, so the buffalo, the Great Slaughter was 1820 to 1880, and beaver hats were the most popular from the 1700s into the 1830s. So it feels like that shouldn't be the case. But also, I just didn't know how to even begin to research that. But that was the only thing I was kind of left like wanting more information about. And so I don't know if that information just doesn't exist, but it's not addressed either way. Maybe that would have been helpful if that information doesn't exist, or it's not, you can't access it, at least to have mentioned that there was an attempt to document that in the book. But one of the fun things that I thought was super interesting is they're talking about, I mean, lots of different instances, right? But like one of the groups of people who are really on the side of like reintroducing beaver are sports fishermen. And I thought that seems strange because so many sport fish are things like trout and salmon, which like clean, like not silty, cold water. And it feels like, it feels like beavers would slow down the water. It feels like they would be muckier. And it feels like if the water was in a more shallow channel, it would heat up more. And so it feels kind of counterintuitive, but ecosystems where beavers are active and healthy and established have way more biodiversity. So there's probably lots of different things that are affecting the sports fish in the area, and they might be just the increase in diversity helps the fish. But one of the other things they were talking about is like that the beaver dams might actually force some of the water into like underground channels, which would cool it off and would make the water downstream cooler. They might sort of like block sediment from going down river for some of the habitat for the fish. And then there was this other thing about like how if all of the river is just clean, deep, fast channels, that like fish don't have a place to like take a break. So there's not like good cover for them. And so they're much more open to predation. Anyway, so beavers are great. They're super cute. And they, I mean, I would not think they were great if they were in my yard, I'm sure. But they're pretty awesome at making beautiful, biodiverse wetland habitats. And there's like all of the, so the fun thing about the book, well, the fun, and the whole thing is interesting. But the like, of course, thing about the book is like, all of this money goes into like these engineering projects to like try all these different things to, you know, create habitats for, again, to like reintroduce the wetland habitat. Oh my gosh, so many words. Like all of these projects to like try to help mitigate drought, to try to help with erosion, things like that. And, you know, like all these engineers do all these like crazy elaborate things where they have to like, the beavers are just so much of the book is people just being like, yeah, and then we let the beavers do it. And like, yeah, it costs us some money to like put them out there. And like in lots of places, what they'll do is they'll sort of like give the beavers like a head start. Like they'll kind of like give them like proto dams to start with. But like they'll just do all this labor for free and they're like end result is better anyway. It's like, oh. Surprise. Not at all. But anyway, so that's Eager, The Surprising Secret Life of Beavers and Why They Matter by Ben Goldfarb. If you're into that sort of thing, you probably already know about it. But if you're not, it's still highly enjoyable. And if you don't want to read the whole book, there are also interviews with him on the internets. So the second book I'll tell you about is called Leg, The Story of a Limb and the Boy Who Grew From It by Greg Marshall. And I also listened to this one on audiobook, and it was read by the author. So here's the blurb. A hilarious and poignant memoir grappling with family disability, and coming of age in two closets, as a gay man and as a man living with cerebral palsy. Greg Marshall's early years were pretty bizarre. Rewind the VHS tapes, this is the 90s, and you'll see a lopsided teenager limping across a high school stage or in a wheelchair after leg surgeries, pondering why he's crushing on half of the Utah Jazz. And to this home video footage, a mom clacking away at her newspaper column between chemos, a dad with ALS, and a cast of foul-mouthed siblings. Fast forward the tape and you'll find the Marshall happily settled into his life as a gay man, only discover he's been living in another closet his whole life. He has cerebral palsy. Here, in the hot mess of it all, lies Greg Marshall's wellspring of wit and wisdom. Leg is an extraordinarily funny and insightful memoir from a daring new voice. Packed with outrageous stories of a singular childhood, it is also a unique examination of what it means to transform when there are parts of yourself you can't change. A moving portrait of a family in crisis and a tale of resilience of spirit. In Marshall's deft hands, we see a story both personal and universal of being young and wanting the world, even when the world doesn't feel like yours to want. Highly suggest the audiobook version. I love a memoir read by the author 90% of the time. And he is definitely a great narrator for the book. It makes it feel, I think that there's some class issues in the book. Like he grew up in a very affluent home. There's some like class issues. There's some like strange, for example, mention a couple of times about an adopted sister who is indigenous. But like just for like 3 seconds, like no. So there's a lot of like stuff about this book that would normally kind of be like, but I think because I listened to it and it's read by the author, he really does. He feels really vulnerable. He feels very authentic. And I felt like, I think that made me more accepting of these things that might have been more off-putting, not in his voice. If that makes sense. Again, just through my own biases and issues. But, so the audiobook, so it has kind of like a, I mean, I'm not, he's not, but it has like sort of like a David Sedaris essay vibe. And in fact, some of the pieces of the book were essays prior, like, prior to the publication of the book, but I never felt like it was like, sometimes those happen where you're like, wait, is this an actual narrated, like, is this a narrative or is this like chunks of something? And I didn't particularly feel like it, I didn't feel like it was disruptive to me in how it was put together. And it definitely has like less like caustic humor than Dave Sedaris. Like, because I don't know, the older I get, the more I'm like, settle down, sir. What else? Oh, so there was another comment. Like I read a couple of reviews before I read the book. And a couple of the reviewers had made comment about how they were off-put by the amount of sexual content that was in the book. I mean, I would say I would not listen to it like with a little person around. Or I would not like I would never listen to any audiobook out loud at work because that would be crazy. But so there definitely was sexual content. And there was, but I didn't feel like I didn't feel like it was off-putting or too much. I feel like I'm much more likely to clutch my pearls like during a romance novel than I was, I guess, because like, again, like in a romance novel, it's like telling you, and it's like meant to be sexualized and salacious, where I felt like a lot of the sexual content in the narrative was just like, this is what happened. Do you know what I mean? It like wasn't meant to be arousing, or like it wasn't meant to like evoke like a certain like, oh, in you. It was just like a friend telling you about something. Do you know? That's like, that was the, so that was just my feeling. I didn't feel like it was, I don't know. Just thought I'd mention it because that was something that several people mentioned, that they were like, oh, I was off put. And I was like, yeah, not me, I guess. Again, I'm much more likely to be like that with a regular romance novel where I'm like, fast forward, you know, I don't know. And then the last one I'll talk about is Still Life with Bones, Genocide, Forensics, and What Remains by Alexa Haggerty. An anthropologist working with, so here's the blurb. An anthropologist working with forensic teams and victims' families to investigate crimes against humanity in Latin America explores what science can tell us about the lives of the dead in this haunting account of grief, the power of ritual, and a quest for justice. Exhumation can divide brothers and restore fathers, open old wounds, and open the possibility of regeneration, of building something new with the pile of broken mirrors that is memory, loss, and mourning. Throughout Guatemala's 36-year armed conflict, state forces killed more than 200,000 people. Argentina's military dictatorship disappeared up to 30,000 people. In the wake of genocidal violence, families of the missing searched for the truth. Young scientists joined their fight against impunity. Gathering evidence in the face of intimidation and death threats, they pioneered the field of forensic exhumation for human rights. In Still Life with Bones, anthropologist Alexa Haggerty learns to see the dead body with a forensic eye. She examines bones for marks of torture and fatal wounds, hands bound by rope, machete cuts, and also for signs of identity, how life shapes us down to the bone. A weaver is recognized from the tiny bones of the toes, molded by kneeling before a loom. A girl is identified alongside her pet dog. In the tenderness of understanding these bones, forensics not only offers proof of mass atrocity, but also tells the story of each life lost. Working with forensic teams at mass grave sites and in labs, Haggerty discovers how bones bear witness to crimes against humanity, and how exhumation can bring families meaning after unimaginable loss. She also comes to see how cutting-edge science can act as ritual, a way of caring for the dead with symbolic force that can repair societies torn apart by violence. Weaving together powerful stories about investigative breakthroughs, histories of violence and resistance, and her own forensic coming of age, Haggerty crafts a moving portrait of the living and the dead. I actually finished this book a few weeks ago, and I still don't know how to talk about it at all, but I did want to mention it because it is a really, like, unlike Leg, with this like dark humor about one's self and position in life. Like, there's no gallows humor in this book. It is grim, but somehow the author like holds your hand through this journey that she's on, and it never feels like she is using the atrocities, the grief of families. It never feels like she's putting it on you. Like, it feels like you're there. She's holding all of this up, right? Like, it's not just her. There's many, many people doing this work. But it feels like she is holding it up, and you're with her, and you're trying, like, maybe you're trying to help her, but she's holding it and letting you see it without letting it crush you. Because she writes about it so beautifully. She's obviously considered it so deeply. She has such compassion for the families and their stories. She has respect. You know, it's so easy for science to get on to find itself separate from humanity, right? Like it's easy to get into a binary, check this, cross off that, this is the cause for this is the result, and like to try to extract emotion or extract like a human experience from this science that we're trying to use to look at that human experience. But she doesn't do that. She has great respect for the science. But she has so much care and so much gentleness around the grief that people experience, the rituals that they use to process that grief, the community that develops around that grief. And yeah, it's a really beautifully, I don't know how somebody could write a beautiful book that has this much grief and sorrow and atrocity and anger, and how she can hold both the very worst things that we can do and the most beautiful things that can come out of it. She somehow manages to keep all of those balls in the air, which is really quite a feat. So I probably would not have read this book if it hadn't been like a part of a book club that I thought I would go to, but then ended up not doing. And then another friend recommended it highly because it is pretty intense, but very much well worth it if you have the bandwidth to be present for it. It's really gorgeous. And I did read this one in physical form. I did not listen to the audio version, so I'm not sure what that one is like. I think this one, if I did the audio version, it would need to be while I was doing something like knitting or hand stitching that did not require, maybe not even hand stitching, but it needs, like if I were going to listen to this one, I would have to be in a place where I could consume it without letting my mind escape, which is not always, I'm not very good at that. I'm working on it, but I'm not very good at that yet. But yeah, I will say that I the parts of the book where she was in Guatemala felt I understood them more. So that's about the first 2/3 of the book. When she goes to Argentina, it feels like it becomes a little bit more disjointed, which is probably just reflective of her actual experience there. But it was harder for me, I think, because also like you have this grief that you're carrying also, like you get a little fatigue by that point, and then the narrative starts to have a little bit less cohesion. And so that was, that's the only thing that I would say. But yeah, and it's something that I didn't know about. And this book, it has some information on the disappearance, the Civil War in Guatemala, but it's not about the actual, like it's not a historical account of that time period. It mentions it in reference to specifically what they're doing forensically, and like what families are experiencing, but it's definitely something that it's open for you to find more out. It's open for you to research more about the actual the original time period, or the not the original, but about the Civil War and the atrocities that were committed, and that are continuing to be uncovered. So anyway, Highly recommend it if you have the bandwidth. It's a very deep experience, and I am very thankful for this author, this forensics author, who has done such an amazingly beautiful job of writing this book. So, yeah, that seems like a really weird place to end, but sometimes that happens. I hope you find something green that was surprising. Maybe something you planted has come up, or maybe an old friend. I found several years ago, we had a few lily of the valley that were next to like our peonies and we have some like daylilies that have always been there. Bless peonies. I've not done anything to those plants. Are they happier than anything else? Yes, they are. But anyway, I remember that I saw that we had one lily of the valley that was blooming and then a couple other ones right next to it. And I had forgotten that we used to have them, I think, before, the peonies kind of spread and the daylilies kind of spread and spread. They cut out the light that the lily of the valley needed. But that was such a delightful surprise to see those. So I hope you maybe either find a familiar friend sprouting up, or maybe something new. I hope you plant something if you can, if you're interested. If not, I hope you can, in a few weeks, find something delicious that's fresh and new, hopefully from your little patch of the world. And I'll talk next time. Bye.